But somehow you look younger this year than you did last year. Doesn't he, Mad Mel?
He does. Clean shaven.
Yeah, you look.
That's what it was, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't shaved in a while, so it doesn't make much of a difference, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's actually a 2-week, 5-hour.
It's Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day. I shaved right before the big night out.
Okay, so let's talk about this time of year. Obviously, very exciting for you. Draft boards.
Yeah.
Potential draft picks, combine scouting. What is your big takeaway? What are you into right now? What is the big conversation point around Field Yates Radio?
I love the combine week, not just because it's here in Indianapolis, but also because it allows you to fill in some of the blanks on some of these prospects. Players that are further down the board, I don't think are going to move as much for me, but some of the players at the very top, you're trying to get a great feel of, hey, I might think this guy is the 10th best player in the draft, but maybe some people around the NFL think he's closer to 15 or 20. And in some cases, as ridiculous as it may seem, you guys all know this now, like there are some positions and some players that the difference between a 4.48 40 and a 4.52 40 could be the difference between going 10th or 20th overall. He's not going to work out this week, but Will Johnson, cornerback from Michigan, is like a good example of somebody that I'm thinking of when I talk about the difference of a 5/100th of a second, that this guy who was a great player for his entire college career, but if you just look at historical trends, there aren't that many 4, 5, or slower corners that have gone in the first 8, 10, 12 picks. So he could
I got to move him safety in there.
Which is a ridiculous thing to do, truthfully. The guy was such a great player at Michigan, but the league has told us, and we see it every year, guys slide down just a little bit because of a 40-yard dash or, the 3-cone, whatever it might be.
Xavier Worthy just ran a 4.21. They're saying 2 more guys are about to run 4.2s, including another wide receiver. That's why the corners have to be fast.
Got to be fast, yeah.
It is a unicorn island out there.
My gosh.
You got to earn. Now, this is not me downgrading anybody's football ability, especially old buddy Will up at Michigan. I'm not saying that. But having enough, being able to put your ego aside enough to move positions to go to the NFL is a big part of this whole thing as well. I think learning about the guys personally is what a lot of these coaches kind of want to find out about here at the Combine. Yeah. How have you heard about those things going?
I've heard more feedback already this week about the interviews than anything that's taken place, or probably anything that will take place over these next few days. And usually it's not like the average. It's usually the guys that you sit there and you say to yourself, I don't know if that guy's that great of a player, but at least I know the floor is high because of the human that he is. Or there's a guy that seemingly has all the talent in the world, and you just don't feel like when you make this guy, well, maybe not, with the NIL era, some of these guys already are extremely well paid, but for some of these guys, they're going to become overnight millionaires. And listen, we all, at a certain age of our life, 22, 23 years old, if you handed me a 7-figure check, it'd be hard to keep your focus and motivation.
Anybody that's going to get a 7-figure check from this draft is already a millionaire.
Yeah, yes, that's probably true. It's probably a good point, right?
That's the world that we're in right now.
It's true, yeah. But
which goes back to the people. Hold on, though. That goes back to trying to find people that still are dogs and still work hard.
Yeah, totally.
And still want to go and get it, because they've been rich for a while. Caleb Williams was trying to start an investment fund.
Yes, right. Yeah.
Before he got drafted, it's like this guy has enough money to start a fund.
Sure.
Before he even gets drafted, it's like, how's he going to continue to maintain motivation? It's like, well, he's chasing greatness. It's like, not everybody at every position is doing that, though, and you got to find those guys.
Totally. I actually used a couple of years ago, and I wasn't doing this role for ESPN, so I wasn't as deep in the weeds on the draft coverage, but Puka Nacua obviously becomes this unbelievable 5th-round pick. And so what I told myself going into last year's draft,
unbelievable bowler.
Allegedly,
guy does it all. I said I'm going to start surveying scouts and just say give me a player that fits the Puka Nacua mold, not in the sense that you think he's going to become an all-pro right away, but regardless of how talented or not talented he is, you're betting on the person, and you're just saying to yourself I'll take 22 of those guys and feel like I got a shot. And so I started to do that exercise this year as well. And I'm not talking about guys that are going to go necessarily in the first round, but it is interesting when you hear the guys that are going to go in the first round. I just said the first name that comes to mind, he goes, Travis Hunter. He goes, no doubt. He goes, do you understand the discipline it takes to not just, play 115 snaps a game is ridiculous. Literally nobody else does it, right? But twice the positional meetings, twice the film study, just the conditioning is a huge aspect to it. And he was like, I don't care.
Can't be putting any bad things in your body.
Nope.
There's a level of professionalism that has to be there.
Totally. And
every human body would break down.
They almost said it's maybe this isn't the perfect word, but it's almost like he's almost boring in some ways, in the sense that it's ball and more ball, right? There's not a lot of distraction in Travis Hunter's life, which with the amount of money that I'm sure he's making and the amount of people that I'm sure want a piece of him, for him to avoid that distraction, I think only reinforces why not just one of the best prospects in the draft, but also probably one of the best people in the draft that you can count on, whether he goes probably somewhere between 1 and 4 by the time it's all said and done.
Okay, so this is a question for what you guys do.
Yeah.
Okay, the whole draft mock thing. Why are people saying this is a deep 3 to 5 draft class? If it's a deep 3 to 5, why aren't they 2 or 1? I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
I don't think I know exactly what that means. Like, hey, the 5th rounders really good this year.
Look out.
Well, why aren't they 4th rounders?
Right.
I don't think I fully understand. So can you understand the framing whenever that's said, as opposed to what my mindset is like, well, if they're then why aren't they?
Right, why don't you just move up the board? If they're so
bingo.
good in the 3rd, why don't they just become 2nd or 1st? It is a good question, and I thought about this because I was going through, I keep like a sort of a running document of these guys, because the process begins for the draft really basically like May of the preceding year. So guys like Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders, who you knew were going to be highly regarded prospects this year, you start looking at them initially, not doing every last bit of homework you're going to do on them, but you start to get a sense. And I think, I was realizing, I called a lot of guys when I was looking, has the look of a 3rd-round pick, and you're like, what does that even mean?
Yes.
And it's like, I think where I landed was
a slower 40.
a little slower wide receiver, but has great hands, right? Or he's a smaller guy, but he's tough and he blocks. And you're just sort of like, is that the spectrum you should be evaluating these players on? Because it does feel like that has become the theme of this class, is that you'd much rather have a bunch of bites at the apple from, call it 75 to 150, as opposed to the team that has 2 first-round picks, which, interestingly enough, there have been no traded picks for the first time in a long time in the 1st round. There will be at some point, but it's a very clean draft in terms of the order to begin.
Well, you trade whenever you're desperate for a certain position, and that position has not been talked about in high regards, which leads to Mad Mel, I assume.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you about, Field. Obviously, in your most recent mock draft, you didn't have any trades in there.
Yeah.
Didn't have any trades in the 1st round.
Well, you made that rule, Mel.
Well, I had to, because we don't know. But when you look at this draft, and everyone's talking about, hey, what are the Tennessee Titans going to do with the 1st pick? Do you feel like we're going to have next to no trades in the 1st round because teams just aren't going to be as desperate to, give an absolute ransom to move up when we might only have, 10 to 15 guys with true 1st-round grades?
I think we'll end up having some trades at the top for this reason. It kind of reminds me of where we were from picks 9 through 12 last year, where at 10 the Jets end up trading back to 11 with the Vikings, and you're like, why are you moving up 1 spot? It was just to beat the Broncos, right? It was to ensure that Denver didn't move ahead of the Vikings and potentially draft J.J. McCarthy, who, as we know, was Minnesota's preferred target there. That could happen at the top. If you look at the order there, let's imagine a world in which the Giants and the Raiders don't land a veteran quarterback. They need to draft a quarterback early, right? Well, the Jets may be in the same boat. If they go into the draft with only Tyrod Taylor and Jordan Travis, who was their 5th-round pick last year, they're probably saying to themselves, we'd like a young quarterback too. So if the Jets call the Jaguars and say, we're trying to get ahead of Vegas, that might cause a chain reaction that might lead to Vegas calling the Patriots and saying, we're trying to get back ahead of the Jets. So I think we'll see some tinkering there. And because you're right, and now I'm starting to wonder whether I should even use this construct anymore. There's not as many guys that, in every single draft class, would be regarded as clear-cut 1st-round picks. You might see some movement there in the 20 to 32 range.
Just because.
Some of it's just because, but a few years ago, the Bills moved up to get Dalton Kincaid, and the Jags moved up to get Anton Harrison. You start to see that
but also
stuff
the guys, the teams that are on the earlier pick side of that particular trade are like, yeah, we'll take a little bonus because we're not 100% sold on somebody. So it's an easier deal maybe to get done in this particular draft class if you start listening the way it is. So maybe there is more action than we expect because it's easier to kind of finagle around.
I do think it's one of the best parts of the draft too. I find it always exciting when
you got Travis going 1 there.
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
you got Travis going 1, which then would lead Cleveland saying we're not passing on Abdul Carter.
Yeah, no. Though this mock was before Shefty came out and basically said the Browns are taking a quarterback at number 2. You might as well. I wouldn't go as far as Sharpie, but we're thinking about the Browns and Cam Ward might be the fit there. I feel like the two non-quarterbacks are the 2 best players in the draft. Obviously, if the quarterback hits, it's more valuable. I haven't had the same level of confidence in these two quarterbacks as I had with the three at the top last year for sure. But even I think J.J. McCarthy would be like a healthy debate with these two players. J.J. obviously was the 5th quarterback taken, but I viewed him as the 4th.
I mean, you're talking about a number 3 overall pick right here. Like, whenever he's saying I don't feel as good about as last year's quarterbacks or whatever, like, people are going to say he's talking down on these guys. Still the number 3 overall pick in the NFL. Yeah, like, this is not a. Yeah, this is not a.
And they're going to go high. Like, I think the floor for either of these guys is probably like, I just can't imagine both of them don't end up in the first 7 to 9 picks, and it could end up being first 2 out of 3 picks. And the reality is that, like, in the case of a team like the Giants, I say this all the time. If the owner comes out and says after the season, we're keeping our head coach and our GM, it means they got to get something done the next year or else they won't be around beyond that season. So if you're the Giants and you don't swing a trade for Matthew Stafford or find somebody on the veteran market, you're not going into next year with, they don't have a quarterback on the roster right now, but you're not going back on, you're not going to like re-sign Drew Lock or
Tom DeVito.
Yeah, Tommy Cutlets and say, hey, we're going to save our job. So, yeah.
How do you feel about Italians, Field?
I love them.
Yeah, how could you not?
I don't know how you couldn't. Yeah.
Connor has a question.
You know
for
what?
you.
I had some good meals down in Epcot. I know you were at Disney last week, right?
Yeah.
Italy and Epcot? Oh. Maybe the best food offerings of the entire place. Did you get there or no?
No, I didn't make it to the whole world thing. I should have, but we were there with the daughter.
Yeah, around the world.
I want to do the
drink around the world.
Got to do it.
Drink around the world.
Yeah, so
real boozed up.
Got to do it.
But then I think Mackenzie's got to be a little bit older.
Yeah.
Probably have a couple friends. Yeah. Have a whole.
That's what we did. Our 3-year-old was, she was in her happy place. It was great.
Dude, it was awesome.
The best.
I had such a good time down there.
Oh, it's awesome.
Watching her just lose her mind was crazy.
Oh,
and then I just cut everybody at Guardians of the Galaxy and looked like the biggest asshole.
How did that go? It worked?
No, I looked like biggest asshole of all time. But when you got on the ride and then kind of when you cleared the room,
you forget pretty quick.
It was like, awesome. Go ahead, Connor. Go ahead.
Yeah, so obviously right now everyone's kind of waiting to see what happens with Stafford and Rodgers and some other guys.
Yeah.
Do you think it is possible where if there is none of those quarterbacks signed in those first 3 picks between Cleveland, the Giants, and Tennessee, who I think we all consider teams that are looking for quarterbacks, that there's a trade up to 1 where let's say Tennessee ends up being a Stafford or a Rodgers destination where they might end up moving the first pick? Or do you even see where, even if the Giants were to get a Rodgers or something along those lines, that they still might just take a quarterback because they don't want to be or expect to be up there in the, next few years?
I think what's interesting for Tennessee is that they might be able to drum up a bidding war between Cleveland and the Giants. And not that either one of them would for sure make that move up there, but just because, you'll hear this often. I think DJ may have said it just a few minutes ago as well. Like, I think the league on average views Cam Ward as a higher rated prospect than Shedeur Sanders. But if the Giants say, hey, listen, we're bigger Shedeur Sanders guys than Cam Ward guys, or we're bigger Cam Ward guys than Shedeur Sanders guys, and Cleveland might see it the same way, then you're not going to settle, right? Like, teams view quarterbacks, it's like house hunting. Like, you got different preferences than other people do, what you actually want in that player. So Tennessee might be able to say, hey, if we think Cleveland and New York are both, they would both take Cam Ward without a problem, but would bypass Shedeur Sanders, might be able to create some leverage there and potentially move down. The difference that Tennessee has in those guys, they both, all 3 teams need a quarterback, but first-year GM, second-year head coach, and Brian Callahan, they don't need to solve the quarterback situation right now to make sure that they're still going in 2026 and beyond. And while Will Levis, there's more questions than answers so far, still young enough, and he was a highly drafted enough player, you could probably talk yourself into another year of trying to develop him a little bit further.
I'm fascinated by, like if the Raiders draft a quarterback, which everybody's assuming, or maybe they get a veteran quarterback, depending upon who's skiing where.
Yeah, there you go.
When and all that type of stuff. It's like you go to a team with Tom Brady as one of the owners, like that's a pretty good spot, seemingly. Even though you wouldn't expect that. And the Raiders are like, we need a quarterback in this world. Well, it'd be nice to go to a place with Tom as a potential mentor automatically.
Yeah, and everyone wants a young quarterback, and Sam Darnold's sitting there at, 27? 28? Yeah. It's not like he's 35. Like, you could get him for 10 years.
One game. That last
game.
Last 2 games. Last 2 games.
Influential couple of games. Yeah, Sam came out really young. I think he was the youngest of those 5 quarterbacks that went in the first round back in 2018. So it seems weird to think that he's still whatever, very much in the prime of his career, whatever you define as prime as. But Sam will do well for himself in a couple weeks here.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, while we're talking quarterbacks, I wanted to ask you about Quinn Ewers because not this time last year, but let's say after the draft last year, he was basically a guaranteed first-round pick.
Yeah.
And then we thought he was playing all season long with a sprained oblique or whatever it was. Comes out he was playing all season with a torn oblique.
Yeah.
People you're talking to, does that make a difference? Like, are they watching his 2024 tape differently and maybe reverting back to 2023? Is his stock going to rise because it came out that he was playing all year with a torn oblique?
Yeah, I think some people that I talked to had a general sense that was what Quinn was dealing with, and they admired to play through that.
Absolutely.
And by the
Texas
way,
boy.
Yeah, and Texas had somebody, we all know, they had Arch waiting in the wings. It wasn't like he played because the only option Texas had at quarterback was him, and if he's letting his entire team down if he doesn't play, and they're going to go, 5-7 or something. Quinn had an interesting year this year. The Michigan game back in week 2 of the college football season looked great. We're in this time of the NFL. We're not all. But so many of these quarterbacks have the ability to impact you with their legs, right? These guys are probably better athletes now than they ever have been, with some exceptions, Stafford types and a few others. But for the most part, you think about some of the best quarterbacks in the AFC and NFC championship games. It's Jalen Hurts and Jaden Daniels and then Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. 4 guys that can really impact the game with their legs. So Quinn's not really going to do that. The arm strength is the part that's come into evaluation with that context because
it's hard to throw with.
Yeah, it doesn't look like a cannon arm, but when you've got really little ability to kind of torque your frame and drive footballs, it's going to look like it did for much of this past year. So I think this week, we were talking about the interviews at the beginning of this segment, this would be a good week for Quinn in that regard, right? He's got some natural leadership skills, and he'll do well in terms of meeting with coaches and getting a better feel for the kind of person he is. If I had to guess right now, probably feels like round 3 for Quinn, but that could be influenced a lot by not just the interviews this week, but also the medical evaluations. His doctors say, hey, I know you're playing through it for the past 4 months, but it's not going to be an issue come OTAs or minicamp.
I'll tell you what, if you're looking for a guy that loves ball, especially at the quarterback position, which you're going to want, playing through a very significant real injury, especially at the quarterback role, would be a good place to start the conversation. He's been a star since, high school? I remember him with that mullet, getting millions of dollars. He had to travel up to Ohio State.
Skipped his senior year.
Yeah, absolutely.
The original NIL, right? He was the first guy that put it on the map, really.
And he evolved from the 17-year-old into this 22-year-old that he is, or 21-year-old, whatever he is, with, dieting and life happening and football happening and everything. It's you got a lot of guys that I think could be great. Like Cam Ward, every time I see a video of him and the way he operates, it feels like he's a good leader. It feels
awesome.
Oh, yeah.
And then Shedeur Sanders' toughness and that in itself of leadership, and then everything he's been around, is he could be a great pro. I think there's a lot of guys where it's these guys could be great pros, as opposed to each year there's a conversation this guy will be a great pro, right? That's kind of the difference.
Yeah, and I think that this year too, and we should probably remind ourselves of this more every year, but where you end up and who you end up with can influence your outlook so much. I'm not I think Jaden Daniels, the best recent example. I think Jaden was probably due for success, probably anywhere he went. But I think that his success somewhere else might not have been quite to the level that it was in Washington last year with a coach that had been there and done that, and a coordinator that had been a head coach and called a lot of plays, and some good veterans around him. And so I think this year, the fit for these guys will influence the outlook so much more. Probably the best example from last year's class, truthfully, is Bo Nix, because Bo had a ton. He played forever in college, had a ton of experience. And it wasn't that Bo didn't have a lot of good tape. It was the question was, did Bo do enough things during his time at Oregon that if that was all he was capable of doing at the NFL level, would they travel, right? The average depth of his targets at Oregon last year, a lot of it was just dink dunk and let the guys do the hard work after the catch, right? But the reality for Oregon was that they said, why would we bother? Do we need Bo to go bombs away when we're crushing teams every single week, putting up 45 points and throwing for 450 yards? And then in Denver, he showed, he had a couple of ropes this past year. Him and Marvin Mims down the stretch.
And Sean Payton's offense was perfect for him.
Perfect. He had, the offensive line was amongst the best in the NFL. That was
You talked about Bo playing a lot of football, which I think is a big deal. That's becoming the new, talking point for some of these quarterbacks. Who played a lot of ball? Cam's played a lot of ball.
5 years,
Shedeur's played a lot of ball. 4 full years. Jackson's played a lot of ball.
Yep.
Will's played a lot of ball.
Yeah, a lot of guys, a lot of experience. Really, if you think about the guys that probably have a chance to go early, amongst, at least in terms of the quarterback construct, Jalen Milroe, a two-year starter is probably the least experienced.
I'd say there's a lot of.
But that's still, 2 years. That's we've seen guys in recent drafts 1 season and they're getting taken.
Tyler Shuck's been there for 8 years.
Yeah, Tyler Shuck, who that guy's interesting. He's gonna have a good week out here throwing the ball. it's really natural for him. He was a highly regarded recruit coming out of high school way back in the day. He ended up at Oregon, Texas Tech, and then finished up at Louisville this past season. 26 on, I think, September 28th, so the age will be a factor there. But I don't know. I tend to think of it with these quarterbacks that are playing until 35, 36. Like, you could have a decade of Tyler Shuck if you believe enough in the player.
Yeah, Whedon came in at 27.
Yeah, exactly. Pitched for the Yankees. When you look at a guy like Jalen Milroe, who maybe didn't have the greatest Senior Bowl, how much can he kind of erase that this week at the Combine? Or is that kind of, hey, Hayes in the barn. This guy's got tiny hands and he played like shit at the Senior Bowl. It is what it is.
You tell us, man, Mel. What do you think?
Well, his hands are small, very small. So guess what? He better be going to a warm weather city. Okay.
That's part of it.
I don't know. Do you want to?
So fast.
Do you want to draft a quarterback?
So he's faster than everybody.
He is. But do you want to draft a quarterback in the second round who your game plan is going to be? All right. Hey, listen. We're going to give you 40 carries today.
Maybe.
And we're not going to throw the football.
Hey, it's power football world.
I'd like him. I would, and this takes the right starting quarterback ahead of him who's willing to let somebody else take a package of plays away from him. But I like Jalen right away as getting almost like a platoon role for a team at quarterback, because you're right. The passing down to Mobile was inconsistent. It was inconsistent this past season. If he runs, I don't know if he will run, but it's going to be amongst the fastest times of any player here this week at the Combine. And if you get an offensive coordinator, and I tend to think right now we're sort of seeing the haves and the have-nots in the NFL. Like, you just watch a game and you know if the coordinator knows what he's doing. One that knows what he's doing with this guy will find a way to take advantage of this speed, because, again, I just mentioned we're in this era of incredibly athletic quarterbacks. He'd be on the short list for most athletic the minute he walks onto an NFL field.
I think every coach that either coached at Alabama or played against Alabama, I forget, said he would be the best running back in the SEC if he was the running back. I mean, it's not even a question. Yeah, it might have been Bill. Bill O'Brien tried to make it happen, which actually gave a spite to Jalen Milroe. And obviously, Alabama was able to win a lot of games with Jalen Milroe at quarterback, and that is a good thing. But in college ball, in NFL ball, it is different. I mean, that's just a matter of fact, the way it operates, the way it goes. It's like Jalen gets on a team, put him as an X-back. Yeah, you can have him take some snaps, have him do a tush push if you want to do. He's incredibly strong, and he is loved in that locker room. The boys love Jalen Milroe.
Yeah, spent a little time around him both at the Senior Bowl and prior to that. He's an easy guy. I mean, he comes from a background, military parents, super disciplined. The guy is a great leader. I really do believe the right team will have Jalen Milroe not just find success, but sooner rather than later. If you look at all the singular traits that the various players in this class have, his rushing ability is one of the more undeniable ones. And he's got a cannon down the field as well. He's got to totally refine the short intermediate passing game work, but he can chuck it down the field. And you can just imagine some mad scientist offensive coordinator who runs the ball with him 12 straight times, and the next thing you know, fake the run and just bombs away for a 50-yard touchdown.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch how it all pans out. There's going to be a lot of guys that get drafted that suck, too.
That's true.
Let's never forget that.
Most of them usually.
Huh?
Most of them usually.
Yeah, percentages tell us a lot of these guys right out here, they can be selling insurance.
Yeah.
They're going to be doing
very well, though.
Strength coach. There's going to be a lot of strength coaches out here.
Yeah, some big boys.
Coaches, future coaches out here.
You bet.
Yeah.
But out here, too, there's going to be Hall of Famers.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
It's the beauty of it. There's been probably less buzz around this draft class in total compared to last year's, just because the talent at the top is not regarded as the same way. I think this is a great draft for scouting departments that know what they're doing, man. I bet the Rams, who have done a great job.
You were a
in
former
recent
scout,
years,
right? Is that correct?
Yeah, but I can't take too much credit for, it was the Chiefs before they were what they are now.
But you were a scout.
I worked for the Chiefs for a couple of seasons, and then things got a lot better. So maybe I was the problem, not the solution.
Okay.
Hey, but Bill, last season during the draft, Bill Belichick trusted you. So
yeah. Bill, who I worked with the Patriots prior to the time in Kansas City, and that was very, very cool to see Bill take a look at that top 50 and use it during the extravaganza, which Green Bay doing it again. Spectacular. Excuse me. That was a bad one there.
You were in the right,
You were there, yeah.
The right
type of word.
I was too busy thinking about this great point I was going to make that probably won't be that great. This is a draft that I can imagine the teams like the Rams, who have nailed the draft in recent years by just finding guys in all parts, all corners, right? It's the first round pick, Jared Verse, was great, but second round pick, Braden Fisk, and then 2 years ago, Puka Nacua in the fifth, Cam Kinchins in the third round last year. They're probably sitting there saying,
"That's a good point.
You guys don't like it? We'll take rounds 3 for 5 and just feast."
Hey, that was a good point. You said it wasn't going to be a good point. That was a great point. That was a great point.
Mike Vrabel's team now.
Yeah.
They're going to have a great draft.
Yeah, I mean,
I think pick 4 is looking good right now. I think those two quarterbacks could end up like if you have to settle for one of Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter.
Oh. Yes, please.
Sprint that card in.
Yes, please.
I'll let you do the honors of sprinting it in.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
That would be
I want one of those too so bad.
What do we got? Compensation and opportunity, they say.
That's right.
That's our Vrabel.
Yeah, there was a new update about T. Higgins, though, that they're not going to rush to T. Higgins, allegedly. Who knows?
Well, that's because T. Higgins allegedly not going to be let out of the building down there. So why would you know?
True.
Yeah.
That's an interesting leverage play there, probably by all sides. Excited to see how it all works out. Draft season is the greatest, and that's when we get a chance to watch this big brain on this baby face operate at its highest level. We appreciate you, ladies and gentlemen. Field Yates.
Yeah,
thank you.
Appreciate you, man. You look really cool. You look really, really cool. Really, really cool.
All right, Field.
Appreciate that. I look really cool.
Always do.
Always a pleasure, Field.
Good to see you, man.
Yep. See you soon.
Belmont Hill guy, cookies and milk.
Thank you, Phil.